بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم افتح علينا بحكمتك وانشر علينا برحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. يا عليم علمنا من علمك ما ترضى به عنا ولا تؤاخذنا بما تعلمه منا. يا حليم خلقنا بخلق الحلم وحققنا بحقائق العلم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. We will try to finish the verses about the prophets, which we talked about this morning. Again, these verses are 13, 14, and 15. وَوَاجِبٌ لِرُسْلِهِ الْأَمَانَةِ وَالصِّدْقُ وَالتَّبْلِيغُ لَا خِيَانَةَ. Necessary for God's messengers are 1, trustworthiness. They are worthy of the trust that is put in them. They are strong, they have good families, they come from good lineages, they are the most intelligent people, they are strong people physically and morally and spiritually. They are perfect epitomes of human beings. And as we mentioned this morning, trustworthiness is the general topic under which we understand the infallibility of the prophets and the messengers. One of the questions that was asked this morning, and again your questions are very good and they're very helpful, and I appreciate them even if I'm not able to answer them, but inshallah I do hope to write this up, and if I do I'll look at your questions because these are the kind of questions that we need to answer. But one of the questions was that usually they talk about fatana. Fatana is keen intellect, that the messengers and the prophets of God are the most intelligent of all people. In this poem, he doesn't mention that because this poem tries to be as cursory as it can possibly be. So longer poems, they usually mention fatana, but here they don't, and it is included under trustworthiness. So they are trustworthy, they are worthy of the trust of prophecy that is given them because of the fact that they are also the most intelligent, the most gifted of all human beings. La khiyana. There is in them no treachery, which refers to trustworthiness. كذاك باقي ضدها محال إذ لهم من ربنا الكمال. Likewise, the remaining attributes of honesty and communicating the message fully, their contraries are all impossible. So they don't lie, they don't make mistakes, they don't conceal the truth. They deliver the message completely, whatever that message may be, whether people want to hear it or they don't want to hear it. So when Jesus Christ comes to the children of Israel, he tells them things that they do not want to hear at all. And in fact, it will lead to their attempt to kill him and to damn him. But he still does it. He's not afraid. This is the way they are. They are courageous, they are honest, they are forthright. Likewise, the remaining attributes, their contraries are impossible. For the prophets have all been given perfection from our Lord. وَجَائِزٌ عَلَيْهِمْ نَحْوُ الْمَرَضِ مِنْ عَرَضٍ لَا نَقْصَ فِيهِ إِذْ عَرَضٍ. It is possible as regards the messengers to be affected by the likes of sickness and any other characteristic causing no deficiency if it occurs. And inshallah we'll talk about this more later, but this is again the belief in the infallibility of the prophets, that they do not do things that would detract from them. They marry, they have families, they buy and sell, They eat, they sleep. They're human beings. They're perfect human beings, just like us. They are the epitome of human perfection. They get sick, they can be poor, they can be afflicted. They are the most severely tested of all human beings. But, they are not blind. They're not blind in one eye. They don't raise their voices in the marketplaces. They don't take charity. They will take a gift. They don't beg. They don't do anything, and they're not afflicted by anything like madness that would detract from their status. And this is very important because God sent them as a mercy. He sent them as a bounty. And as part of his mercy, he makes them very attractive to follow. So if you were to see a messenger or a prophet, they're all beautiful human beings. They are spectacular human beings. They are charismatic human beings. And there is nothing in them that would naturally detract from following them. This is God's mercy, so that when you see the prophet or the messenger of God, then you are inclined to believe him. You are inclined to follow him. And that also means that for us as representatives and heirs of the messengers and the prophets, it's very important for us to present ourselves and to live in a way that is fair and just and merciful and kind. And one of the greatest sins that Muslims can do, which many Muslims do today, is to behave in such a way, out of ignorance and injustice and lack of mercy, so that people are repelled by them. And in this case, then you are making people feel repulsion towards the messengers themselves. And this is a great sin. So we are the heirs of the prophets and the messengers, and therefore we have the responsibility also to lead good lives and to be fair and just and to be helpful, to be the middle nation, the moderate nation, and to bear witness over mankind, to be the judges between people. And this is the way Muslims are when they take this inheritance and they imbibe it. But this inheritance comes through tradition. And we believe in the miracles of the prophets, which we'll come back to talk about more later. We believe that all prophets have the same message. They have one universal message, which is repeated as needed, because of the fact that people get it and they distort it. This is the history of the antagonism between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. One of the most effective ways to harm people is to alter the prophetic teaching that was given them. So always this is renewed by new prophets and new messengers. They have the same teaching, the primordial teaching. And as we said this morning, in the definition of prophets and messengers for us, they are not just people who receive inspiration from God or knowledge of the future, but they are men who receive the law and who are required to deliver the law. And there are women who receive the word of God, who receive inspiration and who do great things. They are perfect women in history, like Mary and like Asiya, the wife of Pharaoh, and Fatima and Khadija and Aisha and so forth. But they are not given the law and commanded to teach the law to the people. So they have one message, and this has to be restored. And inshallah, we will talk about that more today, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So let's go back to giving an account of the 25 messengers that are mentioned in the Quran. And we talked this morning about, we're trying to take them in chronological order. So you have Adam, and you have Idris, Enoch, and you have Noah. These are before the flood. We talked about that this morning. And we are all the descendants of these prophets. Every one of us descends from Nuh and from Idris and from Adam and also from the third son of Adam, who is Seth, or Seth. Then after that you have Hud, who was sent to Ad. And then you have Salih, who was sent to Thamud. And we talked about Thamud. Thamud are an ancient people, and they have an alphabet that they wrote with. They have inscriptions that are very common in the Arabian desert, especially in Hijaz. And we talked about that. And that alphabet is probably the origin of the Latin alphabet, the Greek alphabet, the Ethiopic alphabet, and even the Arabic alphabet. Then we talked about Abraham. When we come to Abraham, then we can begin to put down dates that are rough, but they're somewhat accurate. So Abraham lived about 4,000 years ago. The prophet Abraham lived about 2000 BCE, before the Common Era. And then he has his son Ishmael, who is also a prophet. And Ishmael is sent to the people of Jurhum, and he's also sent to the other tribes of the Yemen. These are called the pure Arabs. Ismail himself, who will have then his own line of children, they are called Arabized Arabs, al-Arab al-Musta'riba. And Ismail also is sent to call the Amalekites to the religion of God. And the Amalekites were Amalika, they were giants, they were big people. And they're mentioned in the Bible. And no doubt some of them must have believed, but he also fought against the Amalekites. One of the things about Abraham and Ismail is that they restore the house of God in Mecca. This house of God in Mecca is older than humanity, but it had been destroyed by the flood. And we mentioned this morning how the Sumerians of ancient Babylon wanted to bury their dead in the place where they believed that Noah had been buried. And they believed that was Bahrain. They believed that it was Dhahran, that area which was called Dilmun. It's a very, very interesting story, but in fact, they lived 1,500 years before Abraham. Abraham is the one who discovers where the house was, which is also where Noah was buried. This is a common Islamic tradition. It's not a very strong tradition, but it's there. And Abraham and Ishmael, as you know, they rebuild the Kaaba. And they institute the pilgrimage. So the pilgrimage had been there since the time of Adam or before. But it is also interrupted, and then with Abraham it is renewed. The house is renewed, and the rites of pilgrimage are given again. And the children of Ismail are entrusted with protection of the pilgrimage. And they did this quite faithfully for thousands of years. They preserved the pilgrimage. And Abraham also institutes the sacred months. The sacred months are what months? Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, and Muharram. So they are the 11th and the 12th months of the lunar year. Dhul Qa'dah and Dhul Hijjah. This is the time when we make pilgrimage. And then Al-Muharram, the forbidden month, which is the first month of the year. These 3 months come together in order that all of the tribes of Arabia and other people around could come to the pilgrimage. And it was forbidden to fight in those months. And by and large, the children of Ismail preserved that legacy very faithfully. They didn't fight in the sacred months. Then there was also a 4th sacred month, which is Rajab, the 7th month, right? Or the 7th month, right? And Rajab is a month where you can make Umrah, you can make lesser pilgrimage. And the children of Ismail held to the religion of Abraham with great tenacity and with great fidelity. And for thousands of years, there were links between the children of Ismail and between the children of Isaac in particular. The children of Ismail also inherit the secrets of the religion. And the children of Isaac and Jacob would come to visit them for a long time. For centuries and centuries, this was the case. Isaac, who is the other brother, who is one of the brothers of Ishmael, they have other brothers as well. He is the descendant of Abraham and Sarah, and he is also a prophet. And Isaac, according to our scholars, was a prophet sent to the people of Canaan. The people of Canaan are the people who lived in what is today Palestine and Lebanon and parts of Syria. And the children of Isaac were entrusted with the law. So they have to teach the law, the Sharia, and they have to practice it, and they also are charged to do jihad. But in this case, it is like war, holy wars, not just moral struggle. And their jihad was against idolatry. And this was a major obligation that was put on the children of Jacob, the children of Israel. Yaqub, who is the son of Isaac, Jacob, he is sent to the people of Canaan as well. And then after that comes Joseph, Yusuf, who is the son of Jacob, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham. And Joseph, as you know, is taken to Egypt. He is sent to the Egyptians, and he's also sent to the children of Israel. And there are indications in Pharaonic Egypt of the Joseph figure. You can, if you study about the pharaohs, you can see that. So Yusuf is there in Pharaonic Egypt, and then in his time, the children of Israel are brought into Egypt, and they're brought there under a people who are called in history the Hyksos. The Hyksos, Hyksos. These are a Semitic people who conquered Egypt, and their name was Hikshash, which means shepherd kings, Bedouin kings. They were a desert people, and in fact they welcomed people like the children of Israel into Egypt. And it's interesting, in this surah of Yusuf, in the surah in the Quran about Joseph, that it never refers to the king as Pharaoh. It always refers to him as the king, which is very accurate because he was not a traditional Egyptian Pharaoh. Then as the generations go by, the children of Israel multiply in Egypt. They become hundreds of thousands, and then they are enslaved by the pharaohs when they get power back from the Hyksos. After Yusuf, we have then Shu'aib, who is in the Bible generally believed to be the prophet Jethro. And Shu'aib is sent to the people of Midian. And Midian are descendants of Abraham. So he's sent to them, and Midian is destroyed because they don't believe. Shu'aib marries one of his daughters to Moses, and Moses meets with him in the desert when he's wandering in the desert. Then you have Musa, Moses, who is sent to the Egyptians, and he's also sent to the children of Israel. And you have then also with him his brother Harun, Aaron, who is his older brother. Then the next prophet that we have in chronological order is David, Dawood. And David is roughly around 1000 BCE. So between Abraham and between David is about 1,000 years. It's about a millennium. And David is a great king, but he's also a prophet. The Jews and the Christians differ on David and Solomon. Were they kings, or were they also kings and prophets? We believe that they were prophets and kings. And again, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we'll talk about a little bit today, these amazing documents, they affirm unequivocally that David and Solomon were prophets and kings, and that they received revelation. David is one of the prophets who receives books. Most of the prophets and most of the messengers did not receive books. But Abraham receives 10 books. In the Bible that we have today, we have no indication of that, at least none that I know of. But again, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's very clear that some of the texts that they have are scrolls of Abraham. So Abraham also had books. Moses is said to have been given 10 books, and then he was given after that the Torah, the law. David was given the Psalms. As we said before, the Psalms of David in the Bible as it exists today are 150. And biblical scholars doubt that half of them are authentically attributed to David. But the Dead Sea Scrolls are very clear that the Psalms that were given to David were 4,050 Psalms. So that means that the vast majority of them were lost. And the Dead Sea Scrolls are really clear about that the books were not protected. And the righteous teachers of the Dead Sea Scroll community hold it as their primary obligation to protect the authentic legacy of the revelation of Moses. And for this reason, to enter the Dead Sea Scrolls community, you had to be tested. You had to be tested for at least 3 years. You had to prove that you were upright. You had to prove that you could keep secrets. And then they would let you in. And when they let you in, you would bring down blessings upon the children of Israel who obey, and curse the children of Israel who disobey. This is very common in the history of the children of Israel. And then you are let into the community to receive the knowledge of the law of Moses. And in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's very clear that they believed that if they were to teach their teaching openly, that they would be opposed by the rabbis and the Jews, and especially the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and that they would be killed. This is a message that is given very clearly in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So they have their own community, they have their fortresses, and they protect the law. And one of the things that is very clear in the Dead Sea Scrolls is that this community believed that the coming of the Messiah was at hand. And they are living in Qumran by the Dead Sea around about 70 BCE, which is about 70 years before Jesus. So they believe that the Messiah is about to come, and they are awaiting him. Very, very interesting. And then they believe that after him will come the great prophet of the end of days, the super prophet. And this is the Deuteronomy prophet of Deuteronomy 18, whom we'll talk about a little bit in a moment, bi'ithnillahi ta'ala, who is our prophet. That God will send to you a prophet like me, Moses, and him you must obey. So this is probably the major belief of the Dead Sea Scrolls community. They believe in the Messiah, whom they hope to receive soon, and then they receive in the great prophet of the end of days who will come after him. So David then has over 4,050 psalms, and the Dead Sea Scrolls even tells us about how they're organized, and that they end, for example, with 2 psalms that are for ta'weed, that are for protecting ourselves from evil and from Satan and so forth, just as the Quran ends with the Surah Al-Falaq wa Nas Al-Mu'awwidhatayn. Solomon then comes after David. Again, in our tradition, he is a prophet and he is infallible. This is something that the Jews and the rabbis differed on. Some of them have a high opinion of Solomon, some of them don't. The Quran talks about that. Then you have Ayub, Job, who is Job in the Bible. And Ayub is a descendant of Esau. Esau is the brother of Jacob. And he is a prophet that doesn't belong to the children of Israel, although he's very close to them. And our scholars say that he was sent to the Romaeans, Yeah, the Romans. Who are the Romans? The Romans would be the Rum. So these are people like the Anatolians, the Hittites, the Indo-Europeans. Then after that you have Dhul Kifl. Dhul Kifl, and Dhul Kifl is the son of Job. And his mother is a descendant of Joseph. So he has in him the line of the children of Israel through Joseph, and he also has the line of Esau through his father Job. And it is said that Dhul Kifl is the one who took in many prophets of Israel and protected their lives when they were being persecuted. Then after that we have Yunus, who is called Yonah in the Bible, Jonas. And Yunus was sent to the Assyrians. The Assyrians are a very powerful people who lived in the north of Babylonia, and their capital was Nineveh, which is not far from Mosul today. And Yunus is sent to them, so he's sent outside of the children of Israel, and he calls them to believe in the one God. They reject him. This is our story. And then he shows anger. He is mughadib. In other words, he feigns anger and he leaves. And then he's swallowed by the whale. We believe in this story. One of the things that's very interesting is that the Assyrians, who were a powerful nation in the ancient world, they adopt in their history the cult of Ashur. Ashur is their great god. And the cult of Ashur is the most monotheistic cult of all Babylonian religion. So again, this is something that's really worthy of study, because we believe that the Assyrians believed in Yunus, that ultimately they followed him. And indeed, their cult of Ashur is a very monotheistic cult. And associated with Ashur, instead of having other deities, which was very common for the Babylonians, they have names of God. So they have Ashur, and then what would have been the names of other gods, these become the names of God himself, like Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, and so forth. So this is really interesting, and this is a historical indication of the prophecy of Yunus. Then we have, after that, Ilyas, who is Elijah, and then he has a prophet who inherits from him, who's called Eliasa, and he's called in the Bible Elisha. So you have Elijah and you have Elisha in the Bible. And we have Ilyas and Eliasa. And both of them are powerful prophets from the children of Israel who are sent against the Phoenicians and against the cult of Baal. And Baal is a man-made god. He is a lord that was created by the Phoenicians, and Elijah opposes the cult of Baal. And this is a very interesting story. We have it in the Bible, and we have it also in the Quran. Then after that you have the 22nd of these prophets, who is Zacharias in the Bible. And then Yahya, John the Baptist. And then you have number 24, Isa, Jesus the Messiah. And these three come together at the end of the history of the children of the prophetic history of the children of Israel. And their message is linked together. And they deliver the message to the children of Israel. The other people in the Quran, like Uzair, Ezra, Luqman, Dhul Qarnayn, who are also mentioned, they are generally believed not to be prophets. And here, our position is that we do not believe or declare, we do not declare anyone to be a prophet or a messenger unless that is conclusively known. So here we come back to a principle which is very important in our religion, and that is that in creedal matters, the only things that you can make issues of creed are things that are absolutely clear in the revealed sources that we have. So these 25 we know are messengers, and we believe in that. But others, like Al-Khidr, for example, who is referred to in the Quran, the one that Moses goes to with Joshua, and they learn from him. Some say he's a wali, some say he's a prophet, some say that he's a messenger, but we don't take a definitive position on that because we don't know. And this is also true of other great people in history who may well have been prophets. So you have people like Zoroaster, Zardusht. Zoroaster was an ancient Persian prophet, and he's an amazing person. He taught a religion that was apparently pure tawheed, pure monotheism. And he was from the west of Iran. He was then persecuted. He then goes to the east of Iran, where he's to what is today Afghanistan. There he's taken in by a great king, and he also does jihad. He also fights, he fights against his enemies to establish the oneness of God. He believes in one God. He believes in heaven and hell. He believes in the traverse, the sirat that is over the fire. It's very, very interesting. Of all of the religions that we know about in the ancient world, Zoroaster's religion seems to be the closest to the religion of Abraham. But again, was he a prophet or was he not a prophet? You can have a good opinion of him. And if you like, you can even believe in your heart of hearts that he was a prophet, but that can't be dogma. That can't be our creed. Because we don't know for sure. Also, figures like Buddha, Lao Tzu in China, who's an amazing figure, Confucius and Socrates, or whoever it may be, these people, it's very useful to study about them. It's very useful also to study about their history. But we don't put them in the line of the prophets because we don't know for sure. Again, the nature of religion in human history is the corruption of the message. This is why prophets are sent again and again. And, so we can study these people with that kind of a background. But they're very, very interesting things in their legacy. As I mentioned before, Socrates, for example, who is one of the most important figures, one of the pivotal figures in the West. Socrates talks about God. Socrates opposed the deities of Athens. Socrates, when asked about God, he said that one of the most essential attributes of God is to be utterly without need. And Socrates is then condemned to death by the oligarchy of Athens because of the fact that he will not cease to attack the gods, and he will not cease to teach wisdom. And Socrates says, men of Athens, after they condemn him to death, they say that if you don't stop what you're doing, you will be put to death. And he says, men of Athens, I honor and love you, but I shall obey God rather than you. As long as I have life and strength, I will not cease the practice and teaching of the love of wisdom. Why do you care about money, honor, and reputation, and care so little about wisdom, truth, and the greatest improvement of your soul? These are really, really interesting stories, and it's very important for us to study this in the best way that we possibly can. In the case of Jesus, as we said before, we believe that Jesus came at the end of the history of the children of Israel. He is the Messiah. The Messiah is a powerful figure in rabbinic teaching. He is a deliverer. And Jesus comes also to tell of the prophet of the end of days. And this is in the Bible. We won't talk about it very much, but it's something really worthy of study. In Genesis, for example, in Genesis 49, 1 and 10, it says, "And Jacob called unto his sons and said, Gather together. And then he said, Gather yourselves together so that I can tell you what will happen to you in the last days." And then he tells many things. This is what will happen to this tribe. This is what will happen to the other tribe. Then he says, the scepter, which is like the power to rule, will not depart from Judah, which is a tribe, and is the tribe of David, nor a lawgiver. Again, you always have a prophet who is giving the law, from between his feet until Shiloh comes. Shiluh. Shiluh means messenger, until the messenger comes. And unto him shall be the gathering of the people. So Shiloh is a really interesting figure, and there are many things like this in the Bible. You have many references to this. Then in Deuteronomy 18:15 to 18, you have the Deuteronomy prophet. And this is the prophet that Moses announces to the children of Israel, and he says that God will send to you a prophet who will be like me, and him you must obey. And he will not speak of himself, but he will speak what God reveals to him. And whoever does not follow him will be taken to task. And this is repeated again in the Acts of the Apostles. And again, as we said, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, this Deuteronomy prophet, whom we believe to be our prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is the major belief of the Dead Sea Scroll community. And they have descriptions of him. They have revelations about him, and they are awaiting his coming. In the case of Jesus, peace be upon him, in the book of John, the chapter 16, you have the Paraclete who is referred to. So Jesus talks about, he says that it is difficult for you that I leave you, because he's only with his disciples for a very short time. He says, but I must go away, because if I do not go away, the Paraclete won't come. And when the Paraclete comes, he will guide you into all truth, and he will tell you the truth about me. The Paraclete is referred to in John 4 times, and then also 6 times he's referred to as the Spirit of truth. So this is really, really interesting. And again, the Paraclete is a human being. He's referred to in the Greek of the Bible as ho parakletos, the Paraclete. This is only used for a man. If he were the Holy Spirit, which is a standard Christian interpretation of the Paraclete, then it would have to be to parakleton. It would have to be in the neuter, because the Holy Spirit is always in the neuter. So most Christians, when they talk about that, they will say this is very ambiguous. Many of them say this is definitely a human being. He's a human being who will come, he will teach, he will preach, he will defend Jesus, he will teach the truth about Jesus, and this is his mission. Okay, and then of course we have the last of the prophets, who is the prophet, the chosen one, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Again, one of the things that we believe in conclusion about the prophets is that they were infallible. And they are trustworthy, they are truthful, they fully deliver the message, they are people of the keenest intelligence. They do what is right, they are perfect examples for human beings. Anything that contradicts that, we do not accept as authentic. And all of the prophets, Lot, Noah, Jacob, whoever they were upright, perfect human beings who walked in the way of God and who did what was right and who set examples for all times to come. One of the issues about infallibility is that you have certain prophets and messengers who do things that seem to be contradictory to that. So Adam is commanded not to eat of the tree, and he eats of the tree. And this is called in the Quran disobedience, that Adam disobeyed. If you remember from the text that Sheikh Hamza is teaching about maharim al-lisan, the things that are forbidden on the tongue, he says in that poem that you may not say of Adam that he disobeyed except in quoting that verse. In other words, we don't make a point of that Adam disobeyed. Also in the case of Yunus, he leaves the city of Nineveh before he's given permission, and he is angry. And in the case of Job, he gets very sick, and he loses all of his wealth, and he goes and he sits outside the city. And in the case of Jacob, his eyes become pure-blind because of his sadness over Joseph until the robe of Joseph comes back to him. And there are a number of things like that in the lives of the messengers and the prophets. And Moses also kills a man. He doesn't intend to do that, but he's extremely powerful. And so when he's called to save one of the children of Israel, he hits the enemy who's attacking him, and the blow kills him. So these things appear to contradict that aspect of the prophets, and our position is that these require interpretation, that these are like the resemblant verses in the Quran that speak of God in terms that are like creation, such as the all-merciful ascended the throne, or verses that speak about the hand of God, or hadith that talk about God coming down to the first heaven in the night. And as you know, these verses have to be interpreted or understood in a way that does not contradict the basic fundamentals that we believe about God, that God is unlike anything in creation. He is the Lord of space and time. So he is not a body. He is not in time. He's not in space. And these verses have great meaning, but they've got to be understood in such a way that they don't violate the foundations of the faith. This is really important. We've talked about that a lot. And also, if you recall, when we talked about the 8 roots of disbelief, one of those roots of disbelief was to take resemblant verses literally. These verses that we just talked about. So to take them literally and to believe that God is actually a body, that he's anthropomorphic, that he's like us, that this is a root of disbelief. So we don't do that. In the case of the prophets, we have something which is similar here. And that is that there are stories in the Quran itself in which things happen with the prophets, or things are narrated about them which don't appear to be in harmony with the infallibility of the prophets. So here we have to take a position which is courteous and which is not strictly literal. So in the case of Adam, for example, and all these other cases, it's said that these are sirrul qadr. These belong to the secret of destiny. And in the case of Adam, that although God commands him not to eat of the tree, that in fact inwardly he is commanded to do so. So outwardly he's commanded not to do that, but inwardly he's commanded to do so. And in this, then, the human drama begins. And the human beings are then tested. They fall to the earth. History begins as we know it. And our scholars say that although Adam ate of the tree, he committed no minor or major sin. He was not sinful. The Quran never says that he was sinful. He was given this command and he did not follow that command. So this is the adab, this is the courtesy that we have towards that. And this is a way of understanding also that you have the literal meaning, which we affirm, but then you have deeper meanings that are below that. One of the great sheikhs, the Sheikh al-Akbar, he said that had I been Adam, I would have eaten the tree. And that's because of the fact that by this, then human history unfolds. And it has in it all of the realities that bring to bear the greatness of the prophets and the greatness of the messengers and the unfolding of human history. So this is a secret of destiny. And this is what we believe also about these other aspects of the prophets' lives. But in all of these things, they are examples for us. So in the case of Ayub alayhi salam, you have a prophet who is afflicted in the most complete and horrible way. He loses his family, his wealth, everything. And he is in utter poverty, and he's rejected by all of those who are around him, and he's totally patient until finally, and he won't ask God to cure him because he submits to the will of God, until in the end, when he makes that dua, then immediately the sickness is removed and he is given back everything that he had. So in this there's a great lesson, and it comes conjoined with the story of Solomon, who is the prophet who is given everything. So this is an example, and then also you have the example of Job as well. In the case of Adam, so we do not believe in original sin. And original sin is a very interesting concept because of the fact that, first of all, most Christians don't believe in original sin. The Eastern Church never believed in original sin. The doctrine of original sin is purely a Pauline doctrine. It is associated with Paul, even though whether Paul actually held it or not is a debate. But the person who insists upon original sin as church doctrine is Augustine. And Augustine is often said to be the father of the Western Church. The Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, and most of the Protestant churches are Augustinian. Augustine's a very important figure, but he is the one who insists that original sin must be church doctrine. And this was one of the things that led to the great division between the Western Church and between the Eastern Church. The Eastern Church never believed that. And the Eastern Church has always said that this has no basis. The rabbis don't believe it either. They don't believe. In fact, the rabbis have beliefs about Adam which are similar to our own. As we mentioned this morning, they have a story very similar to our story. When Augustine sets forth the doctrine of original sin, then he is opposed by a British monk whose name was Pelagius. And Pelagius leads a very strong attack against Augustine. And the reason why he does this, he's probably a Welsh or a British monk from what later on would become England. But this is before the Saxons are there. And for Pelagius, this doctrine has no basis in church history. It's like, where did you get this from? And then also, it's like, so what is a monk's life about? If, we live in original sin, and there's, then what is the purpose of of all these things that monks do? Practicing, trying to overcome the self and trying to draw near to God and trying to divorce themselves for the world. So for Pelagius, this is a rejection of the entire ascetic tradition that monks had stood for. And this is a really interesting story. But for us and for most rabbis, Adam eats of the tree and then he asks God's forgiveness and he is forgiven and that's it. And no one carries the burden of another. But in the doctrine of Augustine, Adam sins and he falls from heaven, and then all human beings are deformed and depraved, and they carry the burden of original sin until Christ comes as a Savior who is crucified, and then they're forgiven for that. So this is part of a crucifixion theology that wants to make the event of crucifixion the major event of history. As we said this morning, we don't believe that Christ was crucified. And again, this is the first matter of faith that the church disagreed upon. That, the crucifixion had not taken place in Jerusalem, but that there were those, as St. Jerome says, and we mentioned that this morning, who said that that's not him. This is one who looks like him. Jerome says the blood of Christ had not dried in the earth of Judea, that is, in the city of Jerusalem, but that there were those who said, it is not him, it's someone else. And all of the apocryphal acts of the apostles of Christ are all docetic. They all say that Christ was not crucified, that someone was crucified in his place. Again, in rabbinic belief, the Messiah, is a powerful figure, and the Messiah cannot be destroyed. The Messiah cannot be killed. The Messiah will be victorious. This is one of his proofs. So in our belief, Christ comes as the Messiah. His message is for about 3 years, and then the Sanhedrin of the rabbis of Jerusalem tries to condemn him to heresy and to crucify him, and God delivers him. We have essentially two common stories. And one of them is that when the Romans came to get Jesus, that he permitted one of his disciples to take his place. And that disciple then had the form of Jesus cast on his upper body. And he was the one who was crucified. Another story is that when the Romans came, all of the disciples were given the outward appearance of Christ. So they didn't know who Christ was. And again, in the Bible, it's very clear that they didn't know that. So they asked Judas to indicate to them which one it is. How would they not know what Jesus looks like? When he is public enemy number one in the Roman Empire. They've all seen him. They know very well who he is. So it's said that all of them then were made to appear like Christ. This is one of the stories that we have in our tradition. And then the Romans say that either Jesus will turn himself over or we will take you all. So then he gives permission to one of his disciples, some say it's Simon, and he is the one who goes forward, and he's taken by the Romans. He's the one who's beat. He's the one who is condemned to death. He's the one who carries the cross. He falls under the cross, which Jesus wouldn't have done because he's a messenger. They're very strong. They don't do that. And then he's crucified. Then he is brought back to life. And as we said by Jesus, and as we said in the Gospel of John, in the Acts of John, it says that John is on the hill of the Mount of Olives looking at Calvary, and he's lamenting like what's happened. It's all over. And Jesus comes to him and comforts him. So these are really important beliefs, and these are elements, these are complexities in the history of religion. But again, as the Quran says, that they do not have knowledge of his crucifixion, meaning to say that they don't have definitive knowledge because of the fact that none of the disciples was there to witness it. They were all far away. They couldn't be around it. And again, this indicates that anything that is taken as an article of faith, it must be based on absolute certainty. So, inshallah, we will end with that today, bi'ithnillahi ta'ala, and then hopefully we meet tomorrow. I don't know how many classes we'll have, if we have one or two. And tomorrow we want to talk about the things that the prophets revealed to us that we have to believe. These are called sam'iyat. These are called things heard. And he doesn't talk about them explicitly in the poem because, again, it's a very short poem. So this is all implied by the fact that the prophets are trustworthy and truthful and they fully deliver the message. Therefore, whatever they've delivered to us, we have to believe in. And the basic principle here is that anything that we know that the prophet taught us that has been authentically transmitted, then we believe in that. We accept it. So here, we talk about things like the belief in the resurrection, the gathering of the dead, the reckoning, the judgment, the traverse, the sirat that goes from earth to the garden, the balance where the deeds of people are weighed, the quenching pool, the hawd, and then the garden and the fire. Other things that we talk about here are the belief in spirits, the belief in Satan, the belief in the angels, the belief in saints, also things like the fact that the human soul never dies, that all human beings are given an allotted time to live, that they're also given their provision, that will come to them in their lives, also intercessions, also the major signs of the Day of Judgment, such as the coming of the Antichrist, and the second coming of Christ, and the coming of the Mahdi, and the rising of the sun in the west. So inshallah, tomorrow we will try to enter into that bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. And may Allah give us tawfiq. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى وجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم يا رب العالمين اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما آمين 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 وجزاكم الله كل خير. Thank you very much. والسلام عليكم.
Assalamu alaikum. There are a few quick announcements, inshallah, then we'll have the adhan for Maghrib when Maghrib comes in.
By the way, what was the tree that Adam was commanded not to eat of? The apple tree. That's never, I don't know where they get the apple tree. In Arabic, the word shajara, a tree, is a plant that has a stalk. So it doesn't have to be a tree. But most of the stories say that the tree was wheat. It was wheat. Some say that it was fig. Some say that it was the fresh date, and some say that it was the quince. The quince might be where they got the apple. The quince is like a big pear. But nowhere in the Islamic tradition is the apple there. And I doubt that it's in the rabbinic tradition either, but that would be an interesting thing to see where that came from.